What is money is a rather important question to me, because you could describe what I do as making money. That's obviously what everyone hopes to do, but in my case, it's actually close to the truth, because I'm a cryptographer. And you guys are cryptographers too, I'm aware of that, but you're not necessarily working on money. And part of this presentation is supposed to convince you that you should be, or at least that your skills are put to very good use if you would be working on money. And the reason why, or at least making a very long train of reasoning short, the reason why cryptography is so important to money is because cryptography is the natural medium for money after you find a convincing answer to the question, what is money? And so the first part of the presentation is going to walk through this argument. And as a result of walking through that argument, I hope you'll agree with me that as a cryptographer, you really should be working on money. And then the second part of the presentation is relating what used to exist, what does exist now, what could possibly, potentially future exist, and so on. So why is cryptography the natural medium for money? To answer this question, we have to start with the question, why is money? What is money? And here are a few candidate definitions. Money is what you buy stuff with. Right? It's very practical, but unfortunately it's recursive because, well, buying is spending money to get stuff. So buying and money is not really solving the circularity here. All right, then we have something more economist-friendly. It could be a medium of exchange and a store of value and a unit of account. And I'd say these definitions are lacking because they are functions that result from the thing that is money. It's not answering what thing is money. So if you have money, it'll turn out to be these things too, but in principle, it could be money without being these things. And also store of value, that's really, really shitty because value is subjective. All value is held in your own mind. Here's some Rothbardian definition of money. It's the most marketable good. And I like that because it shows that money is a good, meaning that it can be traded. And it shows that money is marketable, or at least that a distinguishing feature of money is that it be marketable, which means that anybody will accept it for trade. But even this definition I don't really like because it's rather context dependent. I live in Switzerland, and in Switzerland there's a different money from here. And that might be an essential quality of money, sure. I also don't like it because it's rather subjective, because people receive different things or will receive different things for exchanges. And it's more than subjective, it's very much focused on the individual. Whereas what I'm looking to answer is the question, what does money mean for a society? How does a society look different depending on whether it has good money or bad money, or whether it has money at all versus no money? So to get to this question, let's go back to Economics 101. In the smallest possible economy, the economy of Robinson Crusoe on his island, there is already a motivation for economic calculation. In this example, he can either, he notices that he's slowly growing hungry, and so if he doesn't do anything, his utility decreases with time. And so he can either collect some coconuts and satisfy his hunger immediately, or he can spend some time and build a net and then catch fish much more easily thereafter. And he has to weigh these two alternatives because it takes time to build a net. And it takes, well, his time is important because that time might as well have been spent building a hut. On the other hand, after building the net, he can collect food much more efficiently, and therefore he will have a lot more time left over afterwards. This process of economic calculation is already present at the individual level. It's not a property of a society or a collection. So yeah, there is economizing on time. There is a capital investment. He's investing his own time and resources to build a net, which is the capital resource required to fish more efficiently, but there's absolutely no need for money in this microeconomy. Up next is a slightly bigger economy. This is where Robinson Crusoe is joined with Friday, which is the name that he gives to the, local inhabitant, native person he comes across. And there are two goods here, fish and bread. And it so happens that Robinson is better at baking bread as a function of time, and better at fishing as a function of time. And the key question here is why would they cooperate? And it turns out they have an incentive to cooperate. Even though Robinson can catch more fish than Friday can, and even though Robinson can bake more breads than Friday can, they still have an incentive to specialize and trade. This is known as the law of comparative advantage and was solved by, David Ricardo in, 200 years ago or something. So suppose that their respective optima lie on these trade-off curves. They can either work in exactly these proportions, or they can specialize and then trade. So if they specialize, what's going to happen is Robinson spends all his time baking breads, and Friday is going to spend all his time catching fish. And then they're going to make a trade. So Robinson specializes, Friday specializes, and they make a trade. The angle of this trade has to be, for Robinson, he has to decrease the number of breads and increase the number of fish. And for Friday, he has to decrease the number of fish and increase the number of breads. These lines have to be parallel and they have to be equal in magnitude. But as a result of performing this trade, they both end up at a point beyond their respective trade-off curves. So even though Robinson is better both at catching fish and at baking breads, they still have an incentive to specialize and trade. That's nice. This motivates a key principle in economics, which is called the division of labor. It highlights the importance of trust, although not quite. If Friday decides to cheat Robinson, Robinson can punish him by refusing to repeat the interaction. And so, yes, there is a need for trust, but you know who's cheating you and you can punish them, and so there is a disincentive to cheat. What's still missing from this picture is money. There is no need for money in this interaction. They might as well barter breads against fish. However, if we make this economy slightly more complex, so that we've already highlighted the trust issue, but if we increase the number of participants, then the trust issue is becoming more important because you might not know who cheated. And so you won't know who to punish. And so trust is becoming more of an issue. And what's also becoming an issue is the coincidence of wants, or the non-coincidence of wants. What if you want to cooperate with someone who can neither catch fish nor bake bread? Well, you have to find something that they do want in order to get them to catch fish and bake breads for you. So now we have an economy of 3 individuals. And once you have 3 individuals or more individuals, coordination becomes a big problem. How do you get people to specialize in what? How do you get them to know what to specialize in? And we want specialization because it maximizes wealth for everyone. And so I would say money is the thing that fixes this. Money is the thing that fixes the coordination problem by being a marketable good that everyone wants in an adversarial context. How does it fix the coordination problem? That's where the pricing mechanism comes into play. The free market sets the price allocates resources. Trust gives an adversarial context. Coincidence of wants gives a medium of exchange. Coordination problem is the essential feature that makes money a proper subject of cryptography. Because money is an information system that is supposed to work in an adversarial context. And we are experts at information systems. And that's why we should be working on money. I would even go so far as to say that traditional money is a primitive form of cryptography, in the same sense that a wax seal is a primitive form of a message authentication code, and a letterbox is a primitive form of public key encryption. So too, coins and banknotes and bank credit, they are all primitive forms of Bitcoin. I guess you could say, theoretically, that another cryptocurrency might fit this bill. I'm willing to entertain that argument. But there's a problem. So people often use the term crypto to refer to cryptocurrencies, and I hate that, because crypto means cryptography, and one of its applications is currency. Its main applications is currency, but the second reason why I hate it is because it diminishes the role of Bitcoin, which I think is very, 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 very important, and you shouldn't diminish the role of Bitcoin. It's difficult to displace, and I think this forum post by Bitcoin pioneer Hal Finney, in response to someone who proposed launching an alternative to Bitcoin, really captures the essence of why it's difficult to displace Bitcoin. He says that any alternative cryptocurrency sets the precedent of displacing Bitcoin, well, then its value will only be relative to the possibility of it being displaced as well. So in other words, the displacer itself can be displaced, so why would we bother valuing it at all? I think this is the root of Bitcoin maximalism, which is the belief that Bitcoin is the best money that will ever exist, and nothing else comes close. I think it's a formidable argument, but I don't quite believe it. So firstly, the network effect, yes, it makes it difficult to displace Bitcoin, but it also makes it difficult to displace the successor of Bitcoin for the same reason. Second thing is that networks do not need to be exclusionary. You can participate in Bitcoin and in Ethereum, and you even have cross-chain atomic swaps that enable you to translate your own local balance. So you can participate in both networks. And a third reason is that certain technologies unlock demands. We had no idea there was a demand for smart contracts until Ethereum came and proved it. And now it's a 200 billion market cap market. And I think the same might be true for privacy, although we already have privacy coins, cryptocurrencies that achieve privacy. And they don't seem to have as big a market cap as smart contract platforms do. And the third reason why I believe that there might be a displacement in the cards is black swan events. Stuff happens. it's theoretically possible that the elliptic curve discrete logarithm problem is broken. Likewise, we kind of do expect that quantum computers will be built in our lifetimes for sure. And when that happens, you'll have difficulty trying to move your Bitcoins to a platform that actually protects your wealth against quantum attacks. And so in the face of these events, there is a potential for disruption. The technology in Bitcoin, let me digress for a second. Bitcoin uses only relatively simple cryptography. So it started out using only digital signatures and hashing. The digital signatures were used to establish ownership, or rather the requirement that the owner agree to the transaction. And hashing is used to generate proof of work, which is where you get the irrevocability and consensus from. So there's consensus about the current state. The irrevocability is going back previous, right? It's twice as hard to rewrite the last 2 weeks than it is to write the last week. And that's what Bitcoin started with, but over the years it has actually accumulated interesting new cryptography. Well, I guess multisig already existed, but nobody knew what it was useful for until they discovered, hey, we can spread out our Bitcoin keys over several parties. So multisig and hash time lock contracts, also a new thing invented by Bitcoiners. I don't think hash time lock contracts was in the code at the time of Satoshi, but it came in later. And with these two primitives, we get Lightning. Lightning is amazing because it allows you to settle debts almost instantaneously. Super fast settlement, and it's scalable in the following precise sense. One transaction is no longer competing with another transaction for scarce blockchain space. And so it's, in principle, scalable indefinitely in terms of throughput. And so we have to take note of the fact that there is actually already quite a lot of cryptography involved in Bitcoin as is. However, the cryptography that I find exciting isn't on this list. So I find exciting zero-knowledge proofs. I find succinct proofs exciting. And post-quantum cryptography, I find that exciting too, and there's none of that in Bitcoin. And there's also no smart contracts, but I understand that, that other platforms do offer this. I'd even go so far as to say network scalability, that's not a cryptography, it's not a branch of cryptography per se, it's a feature that I would like a cryptocurrency to have, and frankly, I don't think that Bitcoin is very scalable because you have to download a bunch of data before you can start synchronizing it. Synchronizing it takes twice as long if the history is twice as large. It's difficult to run a node to participate in the Bitcoin network, let alone Ethereum. Also, a feature I'd like is privacy. And I have an intuition that the way to achieve that is with a mixnet, but then there's also no mixnet in Bitcoin, at least not at layer 1. There are mixnets that work on top of Bitcoin. But the problem there is obviously opt-in privacy. Why would I soil my pristine virgin coins with your dirty mixnet? And so if I were Satoshi, I would make sure to include these technologies because I find them exciting. And the way to achieve the features on the right-hand side of this picture that are not achieved yet, I think, is through a zero-knowledge start. And so if you were wondering what it is that occupies me these days, One of the things is I'm building a zero-knowledge Stark engine called Triton. So in case you were wondering, the whole idea behind Starks is that we take the triple input program output, which represents a computational claim, and we take this and we execute it on a virtual machine, thereby generating an execution trace. And we split this computation into two parts: the prover on the one hand, who produces a proof, and the verifier on the other hand, who verifies the proof. And the proof pertains uniquely to the triple input-output program, and the verifier outputs a 0 or a 1. Most of what your node does when it synchronizes to Bitcoin or any other network is verify. New incoming packet, verify. Transaction, verify. Block, verify. Verify, verify, verify. You make verification fast, then you make it easy to participate in the network. And that's exactly what Starks achieve, because the resources that the prover needs are different from the resources that the verifier needs. And so the prover can take in secret inputs, secret key data. The prover can take boatloads of memory, and the verifier doesn't need that, and can still generate cryptographic certainty that the input-output program tuple represents a valid computational claim. So that's what we mean by succinctness. The verifier is an order of magnitude faster than the prover. Transparency is something that was really only discovered in the last 2 years or something, or at least a way to make snarks transparent. It just means that there is no trusted setup and no cryptographic toxic waste to get rid of afterwards. Zero knowledge means that the prover has access to secrets that the verifier does not have access to. And as a cherry on top, what we get out of all of this is that it is a post-quantum proof system, meaning that it resists, or it promises to resist, attacks deployed on future quantum computers. So what can we do with a Stark engine? Well, one thing is we can compress the UTXO set, which is the set of all dangling edges in the transaction graph. If every edge represents a coin and every node represents a transaction. The set of dangling edges, those coins that can still be spent, that's the UTXO set. UTXO stands for unspent transaction output. And for Bitcoin, it's about 3 gigabytes, I think, currently, which is, you can download Dark Knight or the UTXO set, but you don't want to download either on your smartwatch, right? If you want to make the network truly accessible to lightweight devices, you want the UTXO set to be compressed by a short commitment like a Merkle tree or something. And you can do that, and then your UTXO grows a little bit logarithmically in the size of the entire UTXO set. And so this is one of the things that allows Starks to do. It allows you to prove the correct computation of the Merkle root, or however you call the commitment to the set, from the underlying set. And so if you require miners to perform that computation and prove it, then you can be certain that the commitment to the UTXO set really represents the UTXO set. Here's another thing that Starks, or Snarks for that matter, allow you to do. If you start your node and connect to the Bitcoin network, you have to run through all of history and verify it. That's why I said verify, 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 verify. It takes a while to synchronize your node because there's just so much data to verify. And in the end, the UTXO set that you want, that's the red part all the way at the end, that's relatively small. And so with Snarks, well, what you can do is you produce a snark of correct synchronization. So I use the word snark and Stark interchangeably. They're very, very similar. The difference is that Starks are transparent, but the properties that I enumerate here hold for Snarks as well. And so if every miner produces a snark proof of correct synchronization, well then nodes that synchronize to the network can just verify the snark proof, read the UTXO set commitment, and boom, they're synchronized. They're ready to start verifying transactions with cryptographic certainty dating back to the Genesis block. Here's another property that snarks achieve. So we're trying to manage state, and on our network there are a bunch of transactions, and these transactions are really just updates to coin balances and combined with a signature. And so it takes a while to download all of this data and verify it so that you can update your state. But with snarks, we can actually compress all of this cryptographic data. All the signatures you can replace by a snark of correct signature verification. All the snarks you can replace by a snark of correct snark verification. And so you have to download far less and you have to verify far less. Much more scalable in terms of participation. Here's another note I want to ring. I think of the UTXO set as a tool for scalability. And why that's true is evident if we build in privacy naively. So what I drew here is a transaction graph without amounts, right? Because all the arrows are the same boldness. It would be even easier to trace payments if the edges were labeled with amounts. But I dropped those for readability. So here's a transaction graph, and it's rather not private because you can trace payments back in time. And so what the UTXO set allows you to achieve is the following. There's an incoming transaction, that's the blue one, and you want to verify it. Well, you don't have to verify it against the entire history. That would be every green dot. You only have to verify it against the dangling edges. Those are the red dots. And so if you store only the red dots, you can verify incoming transactions relatively more efficiently than if you were to store all of history. Fair enough. This is what Bitcoin already does, cleverly so. But what happens if we try to build in privacy naively? So I deleted all the edges, and now there's a new transaction and we want to verify it. Well, every transaction has to have an origin, and you need to verify that it has an origin, even if you're not allowed to know what the origin was. So you're going to need a zero-knowledge proof that one of these origins, one of these decoy origins, was the true origin. And this is why privacy technologies, or naive privacy technologies, don't scale. Because you need a zero-knowledge proof, or you need a way to verify it that pertains to the entire history of the network. That's the nullifier set. In cryptocurrencies like Zcash and Monero, every coin that is unlocked produces a nullifier, and this nullifier set guarantees that double spends will be caught because the nullifier set is public, but at the same time this set keeps on growing forever. And so if the protocol is twice as old, the nullifier set will be twice as big. That's not very scalable. So that gives a linear growth, whereas if I were to design a cryptocurrency, I would make sure that this growth in workload is at the very least sublinear, or hopefully polylogarithmic or something like that. And I think this proposal called Quiz comes close. This was Asia Crypt 2019, I believe. And the idea there is that there is a UTXO set in every block or at least when the block is mined, there is a UTXO set, and the miner is charged with randomizing the UTXO set. So every commitment is updated and then they're shuffled, but the commitments are updated in a way that the underlying decommitment message cannot be changed. The miner is tasked with producing a zero-knowledge proof of correct shuffling, so there can be no cheating, but the miner knows the permutation that sends the previous UTXO set to the new one. And so this construction actually recycles the UTXO set, quite cleverly so, and it prevents traceability of transactions back in history. It does this at the expense of anonymity, but to benefit scalability. And I think that's the right way to think of it. Because there's no cost to scalability, in contrast to the naive solution for privacy. The problem, though, is that you do have to trust the miner to select a suitable permutation and not to sell that permutation. I mean, you could even require that the miner's permutation satisfies a hash problem or something, and that guarantees that it's more or less pseudo-random, but the miner can always sell that permutation to three-letter agencies or to whoever you don't want to track your payments. And that sucks, and we fixed it. Stand by for a paper in the next, well, actually I'm very busy, but I do want to write this paper. We totally fixed it. We don't have to trust the miner anymore. So that notion about sacrificing perfect anonymity in exchange for greater scalability, that's the note I want to end on with a nice little diagram. So we can either achieve privacy directly using snarks, or what we can do using snarks is to benefit scalability. When we achieve scalability, we can support a larger user base, and it's crowds, a larger user base that you need to provide privacy, that you need to make privacy meaningful to begin with. All right, with that, I'd like to close my presentation and open the floor for questions.